It all started on a quiet night, when the world thought it was safe and danger seemed far away. But danger had a name, and it was an assassin unlike any other. Silent, deadly, and unstoppable. This was a man who had struck fear into the hearts of everyone who dared cross his path. Entire cities whispered about him, and even the strongest warriors avoided crossing his path. No one thought they could survive an encounter with him, until tonight. And then, Bruce Lee appeared, not as a fighter seeking glory, not as a hero chasing fame, but as a man who carried a calm that was almost unnatural. His eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the darkness as if he could see every hidden danger, every secret move, every heartbeat of his opponent. There was no fear in him, no hesitation, just a quiet, deadly focus that could stop even the most chaotic storm. The assassin thought he had the advantage. He thought he had prepared for everything, anticipated every move. But he had never faced anyone like Bruce Lee. He had never faced someone whose mind was faster than lightning, whose body moved with a precision no human could comprehend, whose every step was both poetry and destruction. In the stillness before the storm, a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife filled the air. People around didn't even realize it at first. They thought it was just another ordinary night, another routine shadow moving in the darkness. But then came a shift, a sudden awareness, a tremor in the air. Something was about to happen, something no one could have predicted. And in that moment, time seemed to slow. Every second stretched, every breath held. The assassin knew instinctively that his life would never be the same. And for Bruce Lee, it was just another moment, another test, another chance to prove why no one could ever match his skill. And just as the first move was about to be made, a sound sliced through the silence, subtle but terrifying in its implication. It was the sound of chains clinking, chains that were about to trap the assassin in a way he could never escape. In an instant, the balance of power shifted. The hunter became the hunted. The world seemed to hold its breath. And the question that no one could answer was, who would survive this encounter? The stage was set. The tension was unbearable. And for the next few moments, everything the audience thought they knew about fear, power, and control would be shattered forever. The air was thick with tension. The assassin, once untouchable, now stood frozen, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Every step he had taken in his life, every plan, every escape route, suddenly seemed meaningless. Bruce Lee wasn't just another opponent. He was a force of nature, calm, focused, and completely unstoppable. And the moment had arrived when the world realized just how fragile their assumptions about power really were. Around them, silence ruled. Even the faintest whisper of movement felt magnified. The onlookers, those who had dared to watch, could hardly breathe. They knew the assassin's reputation. He was lethal, precise, and ruthless. He had survived impossible situations, crushed opponents without hesitation, and left a trail of fear wherever he went. And yet now, here he was, standing face to face with a man who seemed to bend reality itself. Bruce Lee moved with a grace that seemed unreal. Every inch of his body was poised, every muscle controlled with absolute precision. There was no wasted motion, no sign of doubt. His eyes locked onto the assassin's, unflinching, unrelenting. The assassin had faced death countless times, but he had never seen it arrive like this. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, yet its presence was undeniable. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This was more than a fight. It was a test of survival, a confrontation between legend and fear itself. Every second mattered. Every subtle gesture could be the difference between life and death. And while the assassin calculated his next move, he realized something chilling. Bruce Lee was already a step ahead. He didn't just react, he anticipated. He didn't just defend. He dominated the space around him, controlling not only the fight but the entire atmosphere. The audience could feel it. Their hearts raced as the tension thickened. Some whispered under their breath, afraid to speak too loudly. Others were rooted in place, eyes wide, unable to look away. There was something magnetic about Bruce Lee, something almost hypnotic in the way he commanded the scene. It wasn't just skill, it was presence, authority, and absolute control. And with each passing moment, the assassin's confidence eroded. Every plan he had ever made seemed trivial. Every advantage he had counted on vanished. And then came the realization, the moment that would change everything. The assassin saw it in Bruce Lee's eyes. Not anger, not aggression, but a calm, calculated certainty. He knew what needed to be done, and there was no hesitation in his execution. The assassin understood, in that instant, that he had stepped into a storm he could not survive. And it wasn't just his body that was at risk, it was his entire reputation, his entire legacy, every ounce of fear he had instilled in the world. It was all about to be undone in a single, precise moment. The tension reached a fever pitch. Every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of movement was magnified. The assassin's shadow seemed smaller, weaker, dwarfed by the legend standing before him. And for Bruce Lee, this was more than a battle. It was a statement, a demonstration of skill, focus, and absolute mastery over fear. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only two forces locked in a silent struggle, one of pure lethal skill and the other raw, unshakable calm. No one could have predicted what would happen next. And yet, as Bruce Lee prepared to strike, everyone knew that history was about to be rewritten in this very moment. The stakes were no longer hypothetical. They were real, tangible, and impossible to ignore. And as the first move began, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The moment stretched into eternity. But in that stretch, the world witnessed something few ever would, a man whose presence alone could bend reality. Bruce Lee didn't just stand there. He commanded the space around him. Every movement was calculated, precise, yet fluid, like water flowing around stones. The assassin, lethal and feared by all, was now forced to face not just an opponent, but a legend incarnate. There was something almost supernatural about Bruce Lee. It wasn't his speed, though it was blinding. It wasn't his strength, though it could shatter stone. It was the way he existed in the moment, completely synchronized with the universe. He didn't react. He anticipated. He didn't strike blindly. He moved as if he already knew the outcome. Every inch of his body radiated control, mastery, and absolute focus. Even the air around him seemed to hum with tension. The assassin lunged, confident and deadly, expecting his opponent to falter, to make the slightest mistake. But Bruce Lee was already there, not with brute force, but with perfect timing, as though the fight had already been choreographed in some higher dimension. The assassin's strikes, honed over countless battles, met nothing but empty air. Or if they did connect, they found Bruce Lee had already shifted, anticipating each attack with a precision that was almost impossible to believe. It was in these moments that the onlookers realized why Bruce Lee wasn't just a fighter. He was a phenomenon. His aura alone changed the rules of engagement. Even the most fearless warriors, watching from a distance, felt a chill crawl up their spines. His calm intensity was magnetic, drawing the gaze of everyone around him. Eyes locked on him, they could feel the energy pulsating, a rhythm that controlled the pace of the fight before it even began. And yet, it wasn't arrogance that made him unstoppable. It was mastery. Every muscle, every reflex, every breath was honed to perfection. He moved with the elegance of a dancer, the precision of a surgeon, and the quiet, lethal force of a predator. Time itself seemed to bend around him. In the split second the assassin lunged, Bruce Lee had already calculated the angle, the timing, the perfect response. It wasn't magic. It was pure, unshakable skill. The assassin tried to counter, to use his experience, his cunning. But Bruce Lee's aura was more than skill. It was psychological dominance. The assassin's confidence wavered under the weight of that calm, unrelenting focus. Every attack felt slower, weaker, less certain. The assassin realized, painfully, that this man didn't just fight physically. He fought mentally, emotionally, controlling fear, anticipation, and reaction as if he were orchestrating a symphony, where he alone knew the rhythm. And the crowd felt it too. Heartbeats raced, breaths held, eyes widening as they watched what could only be described as a human force transcending normal limits. Every slight movement from Bruce Lee held meaning. Every gesture hinted at the inevitability of what was coming. People weren't just witnessing a fight. They were experiencing the legend of a man whose very existence defied logic and fear alike. The assassin's fear grew. Not sudden, not chaotic, but deep, creeping, undeniable. He realized that no matter how lethal he had been before, he had never faced someone who made skill look effortless, fear look foolish, and control look natural. Bruce Lee didn't just dominate the space, he dominated the mind. And in that moment, the assassin understood the unthinkable. He was already losing, not because of strength or numbers, but because of sheer presence, mastery, and unshakable aura. Time seemed to stretch again. The world waited. The tension was unbearable. Every breath, every flicker of movement, every heartbeat pulsed with a question. What would Bruce Lee do next? And even before the first strike connected, the answer was clear. The assassin had already been trapped, not by chains or weapons, but by the sheer force of Bruce Lee's mind, body, and legend. It was awe-inspiring, terrifying, unforgettable. And in that silence, everyone watching understood one undeniable truth. Bruce Lee wasn't just fighting. He was rewriting the very rules of fear, skill, and legend itself. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Every movement, every shadow, every breath seemed magnified, as though the world itself had slowed to a crawl. The assassin, once the embodiment of fear and lethal precision, now felt an unfamiliar, creeping panic. He had faced countless deadly opponents, yet none had ever exuded the presence that Bruce Lee radiated. There was a weight to his aura, a certainty, a control so absolute that even the most experienced warriors instinctively knew they were outmatched. Time itself seemed to bend around him. Even as the assassin prepared his next move, he realized with a jolt that he had no idea where the strike would come from, or if it would come at all. Bruce Lee didn't fight predictably. He didn't rely on brute strength. He relied on understanding, on anticipation, on reading the very rhythm of his opponent's mind. And in that split second, the assassin realized he was already one step behind, trapped in a mental game he didn't even know he was playing. The crowd around them could feel it too. Every spectator held their breath, as if afraid that even a single exhale might break the fragile tension. Some eyes widened in disbelief, others tightened with anticipation, yet all were drawn, hypnotized to the unfolding scene. Bruce Lee's calm, unyielding focus had transformed the ordinary into something extraordinary. What should have been a simple fight now felt like witnessing a force of nature about to unleash its full power. And then, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere shifted. The assassin felt it before he could see it. A subtle change, a faint hum of movement, a ripple in the air that spoke of imminent chaos. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. But it carried a terrifying promise. Something unprecedented was about to happen. Bruce Lee's eyes, calm yet piercing, locked onto the assassins with a clarity that made it impossible to look away. It was the gaze of a man who had already foreseen the outcome, who had already mapped every possibility, who already held the end in his hands. The assassin's mind raced. He tried to predict Bruce Lee's next move, to anticipate, to find a weakness, to regain control. But with every passing second, his confidence eroded. Every option he considered seemed insignificant, trivial, meaningless in the face of such overwhelming mastery. Fear, slow and insidious, crept into his mind. It wasn't sudden or loud. It was methodical. It was paralyzing. He realized, perhaps too late, that he was trapped, not just physically, but mentally. And then came the first hint of the impossible. A subtle shift in Bruce Lee's stance, a barely noticeable adjustment of his hand, a flicker in his eyes. It was enough to make the assassin flinch, to make him hesitate, to make him question every calculation he had made in his life. Every plan, every strategy, Every instinct told him strike, but something in that moment warned him that striking now would be catastrophic. The suspense built with unbearable intensity. The crowd, invisible observers of this high-stakes duel, could almost feel their hearts pounding in sync with the unfolding drama. The assassin's every thought was a storm of panic and uncertainty, while Bruce Lee's presence remained unervingly calm, controlled, untouchable. And in that silence, in that heartbeat between chaos and action, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the impossible moment that no one could have predicted. It was clear, something insane was about to happen. Not chaos, not violence, not brute force, but something so precise, so brilliant, so unexpected that it would leave everyone questioning reality itself. The assassin's confidence, carefully built over years of fear and reputation, was crumbling. And as Bruce Lee prepared to act, even the audience could sense that what was coming would be more than a fight. It would be a moment etched into legend, a moment that defied explanation, a moment that no one present would ever forget. The world teetered on the edge of disbelief, anticipation, and sheer awe. And in that tension, one truth became undeniable. The insane moment was imminent, and nothing, not skill, not fear, not experience, could prepare anyone for what Bruce Lee was about to do. The world seemed to pause. Even the night itself held its breath, as if aware that what was about to happen would be unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. The assassin, a man whose name alone had once struck terror into countless hearts, now stood uncertain, weighed down by an invisible force. That force was Bruce Lee, not just a fighter, not just a man, but a living legend whose presence warped reality. Every eye in the vicinity was glued to the unfolding scene. Spectators, some hidden, some daring to watch openly, felt the electric tension vibrating through the air. It wasn't just fear. It was awe, respect, and a terrifying anticipation all mixed into one suffocating sensation. Even the most seasoned observers knew instinctively that this was no ordinary fight. It was a collision of fate, a confrontation that would be remembered for lifetimes. Bruce Lee didn't move recklessly. There were no wild swings, no loud, aggressive posturing. Instead, he exuded a quiet, lethal control. Each muscle, each gesture, each twitch of his eye communicated one undeniable message. The outcome is already determined. It wasn't arrogance. It was mastery. He was in complete harmony with the fight, the assassin, and the very moment itself. And in that harmony lay an almost unbearable power that left the assassin reeling. The assassin tried to regain composure, tried to remember all his training, every deadly tactic he had perfected over years of battle. But Bruce Lee had already stripped him of certainty. Every move the assassin planned was anticipated before it could even be executed. Every thought was met with subtle cues that hinted at complete control. And with each passing heartbeat, the assassin realized that his legendary skill might not be enough. The anticipation built like a storm ready to break. Bruce Lee shifted slightly, imperceptibly, a motion that carried the promise of something astonishing. The crowd sensed it instinctively. They leaned in, held their breath, their hearts sinking with the rhythm of the unfolding drama. Even from a distance, it was clear the assassin's confidence had crumbled, replaced by a creeping dread that only grew stronger with every second. And then the air seemed to vibrate, charged with the silent energy of an imminent clash. Chains, weapons, or brute strength would have mattered little in comparison to what Bruce Lee was about to unleash. It wasn't force, it was precision. It wasn't chaos, it was inevitability. Every subtle flick of his wrist, every pivot of his stance suggested that he was not just fighting the assassin, he was rewriting the rules of combat itself. The assassin's mind raced. He tried to predict, to anticipate, to react, but it was already too late. Bruce Lee's calm dominance had created a cage around him, invisible yet inescapable. Every option he considered dissolved into uncertainty. Every attack he thought of felt sluggish, ineffective, meaningless. Fear seeped deeper into his consciousness, Not explosive or chaotic, but cold, calculated, and paralyzing. He was trapped, mentally and physically, by a man who had become more than human in that moment. The spectators felt the tension rising like a living entity. They could almost taste it, feel it pressing against their chests. Some whispered, some froze, some turned away, unable to witness what they feared and craved simultaneously. The air crackled with energy. The world seemed to bend around the two combatants, as if acknowledging that this was no ordinary fight, but an epic confrontation between legend and reputation, mastery and fear, calm and chaos. And then came the unspoken truth that everyone felt but no one dared to say aloud. The assassin, for all his skill and infamy, was already at a disadvantage. The power of Bruce Lee's presence, his anticipation, his aura, had rewritten the rules. What was about to happen would not just decide who survived. It would redefine what it meant to face the impossible. Every second dragged, every heartbeat thundered, and every mind in the vicinity became trapped in the unfolding suspense. And in that frozen moment, the world understood. The showdown was inevitable, the insane moment unavoidable, and the outcome, nothing short of legendary. The moment had arrived when the world seemed to stand still, holding its collective breath. The assassin, a figure once feared by thousands, now trembled, not from physical exhaustion, but from the realization that he was facing a force beyond comprehension. Bruce Lee wasn't merely a fighter in this scene. He was the embodiment of mastery, focus, and inevitability, a living storm that moved with grace and precision. Every flicker of his eyes, every slight motion of his body, hinted at an outcome so perfect, so calculated, that even the boldest spectator could feel it in their chest. The assassin's mind raced desperately, trying to cling to control, trying to imagine a way to survive what was coming. But Bruce Lee had already rewritten the rules. There were no escapes, no tricks, no sudden moves that could outsmart him. Every thought the assassin had, every plan he formulated, was anticipated and dismantled before it even existed. And in that crushing awareness, a cold dread settled over him. He understood now that he was not merely in a fight. He was a player in a story where the ending had already been written, and the author's hand was Bruce Lee's. The spectators, though unseen by the combatants, were acutely aware of the unfolding drama. Every heart beat faster, every breath held in tense anticipation. They sensed that what was about to happen would be more than a clash of skill or strength. It was about to become a moment of legend, one that would leave an indelible mark on anyone who witnessed it. The sheer intensity of Bruce Lee's presence dominated the atmosphere. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was the quiet, unyielding force of inevitability, pressing down on everyone in the vicinity. Bruce Lee's movements, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, hinted at the ultimate payoff that was about to unfold. Every shift of his stance, every subtle tightening of his grip, every focus of his gaze was a prelude to the action that would define the entire encounter. He was orchestrating the scene with complete mastery, guiding the assassin, the audience, and even the very air around them toward a climax that no one could ignore. The tension was no longer suspenseful. It was electric, alive, almost sentient. The assassin tried one last gambit, a desperate maneuver fueled by fear and instinct. But Bruce Lee anticipated it before it even began. The assassin's every strike, every feint, every movement was met with either emptiness or precision, subtly nullified by the calm, deliberate mastery that defined Bruce Lee. In that instant, the audience could feel the shift, the unspoken promise of what was about to happen. It wasn't merely victory. It wasn't simply a win. It was a moment where skill, focus, and legend converged into a single, unforgettable action. Every spectator, every hidden observer, every heartbeat in the world seemed to echo the same thought. This is it. The insane moment, the climax, the payoff that justified the tension and suspense was imminent. Bruce Lee's calm, unshakable demeanor promised one thing: The impossible was about to become reality. And for the assassin, for anyone who had underestimated him, it was a realization that came too late. And then, in that unbearable pause between anticipation and action, every second stretched, magnifying the stakes to an almost painful intensity. The audience could feel their own pulse sinking with the unfolding drama, their minds caught in the grip of suspense, curiosity, and awe. They knew, instinctively, that what they were about to witness would be extraordinary, so precise, so masterful, and so decisive that it would leave a mark in memory long after the scene ended. Bruce Lee had promised the payoff, not with words, but with presence. The assassin understood it. The audience felt it. The world, though silent, was aware. And in that moment, the tension reached its peak. Every expectation, every fear, every heartbeat of the scene pointed to the same inevitable truth. The climax was here. The insane moment was coming. And nothing, no skill, no fear, no preparation, could prepare anyone for the magnitude of what Bruce Lee was about to unleash. The world held its breath. Every heartbeat, every flicker of movement, every whisper of air seemed magnified, as if the universe itself knew it was about to witness something extraordinary. The assassin, once the embodiment of fear, now stood frozen in disbelief, paralyzed not by Bruce Lee's strength, but by the absolute certainty in his presence. Time itself seemed to slow, stretching the moment into eternity, as if teasing the world for the climax that was about to unfold. Bruce Lee didn't need to speak. He didn't need to shout or warn. His calm, focused gaze said it all. In that instant, the assassin, and anyone who dared to watch, understood a simple, terrifying truth. This was not a fight that could be measured in strikes or blocks. This was a confrontation of inevitability, mastery, and legend. Every subtle movement Bruce Lee made hinted at an outcome so precise, so final, that it left no room for doubt. And then came the moment, the instant where anticipation collided with action. A shift so small, it was almost imperceptible, yet so decisive it carried the weight of inevitability. The assassin's confidence, built over years of skill and fear, crumbled in that single heartbeat. Every feint, every plan, every ounce of strategy he had relied upon evaporated under the silent, unyielding dominance of Bruce Lee. The world seemed to shudder in recognition. The legend was unfolding before their eyes. The audience, whether visible or hidden, could feel it. Heartbeats raced, breaths held, eyes widened. There was awe, disbelief, and an emotional pull so intense that even those watching from afar felt trapped in the tension. This wasn't just a showdown. It was an experience, a spectacle, a demonstration of what happens when human mastery reaches its peak. Every second was stretched to its maximum, every movement magnified, every outcome uncertain, yet somehow undeniably destined. Bruce Lee's calm control was more than physical skill. It was psychological dominance. He didn't just fight. He dictated the rhythm, the fear, and the anticipation. He didn't strike blindly. He moved with the inevitability of a storm, knowing every reaction, every hesitation, every blink of the assassin's eyes. And in that precision, he promised a payoff that no one could ignore, a resolution so satisfying that it justified every moment of suspense that had led to this point. The assassin realized, too late, that he was no longer in command of his own fate. He was caught in a web of anticipation, skill, and legendary mastery that he could not escape. And the audience understood that they were witnessing not just a fight, but a moment of history, a demonstration of why legends endure and why some forces are simply beyond comprehension. And then, as the first decisive motion was made, the tension snapped. The silence shattered with precision. The anticipation released like electricity, and every mind present and watching felt the magnitude of what had been unleashed. Bruce Lee's mastery had delivered the ultimate payoff: fear, awe, admiration, and an unforgettable sense of inevitability. As the scene settled, one truth remained undeniable. No one could move, no one could breathe without acknowledging what had just occurred. Bruce Lee had transformed a moment of suspense into a story that would live forever. The assassin's legend was shattered, the audience's hearts were captured, and the world witnessed what it truly meant to face a master. And for those watching this unfold, one question lingered in their minds, compelling them, trapping them mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. What will happen next? Bruce Lee had not just fought, he had demonstrated the unimaginable. And in that moment, every viewer knew they had witnessed something unforgettable.